Have you ever said this to yourself? I'm not good enough. I can't believe I did that. How could I be that stupid? Or, I never get anything right. You ever say that to yourself? What about this? Are there moments in your memory, like maybe something from your childhood way back, who knows how long, that when you remember that moment, and maybe it was something where you were embarrassed or you were humiliated or someone said something to you, and you can feel how you felt when that happened. I have some of those moments where I still feel those feelings that I had all those years ago, like when that event happened. Or maybe those words that were said to you were said so often that they become permanently in your psyche. And those messages become what you believe about yourself. So you think that you're less than other people, or you don't actually have the skills, or you're not worthy to do what you think you should be able to do. All of us, in some way or other, have had these experiences where we think we're less than, when we think that we're not worthy for the things we're supposed to be doing, where we think, I don't know how many people have read the book, The Catcher in the Rye, but where we all are phonies. In that book, the main character sees everybody around him as fakes, but really in the story, he realizes he's the one who's the most fake of all. Well, actually, I don't know if he realizes it, but that's what the author wants you to see. He's trying to keep people from discovering the truth about the world whenever he's the biggest fake. Maybe that's how we feel about ourselves, like we're faking it. Well, if that's you, then today we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about how God can and does use anyone. So if you want to take out your Bibles and turn to Exodus chapter 2, we're going to rejoin this story in 2:11. So here in the Pew Bible, 2:11 is page number, let's see, I'll get there, and then I'll tell you. 2:11 starts on page 79. So we're going to start in 2:11, but we will be jumping through 2, 3, and 4. We will not be reading all of any of these chapters. We'll be jumping through them. And as we go through Exodus, you're going to see that we will do this quite a bit, that we're going to have to sort of jump to key points in the stories, and then I'll fill in the rest. So what that means is you can go home and you can read 2:11 through 4, or whatever we get to at the end of 4. It might be the whole chapter, where you can then go home and read it on your own, and then you'll get more of the whole picture. But let's take a look at 2:11 and see where this starts. So chapter 2, verse 11 of Exodus. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. So if you're here last week, we read about and learned about the miraculous story of Moses' journey to the home of Pharaoh. We learned about how the story of Exodus is soon after the story of Genesis, and Genesis ends with Abraham's family in Egypt. But now the tides have turned, and Egypt is not friendly to the Israelites, and they become enslaved. And then Moses ends up as a baby in the home of Pharaoh, under being raised by one of Pharaoh's daughters as an adopted son. And this child is the child that was rescued from destruction. And God's going to use this child to save his people. But now, from verse 10 to verse 11, Moses grows up. We don't know how many years have passed, it doesn't say. We don't know much about Moses' adult life, what he did in Egypt or anything. None of that's revealed to us. All we know is that he seems to know something about his origin story because he goes to see the Israelites and he watches them while they're working. We don't know how much he knows, but he seems to know something about them because he's there clearly because he wants to see what they're doing. And while he is seeing the Hebrews, an Egyptian starts to beat one of his people. And so this is what Moses does. Verse 12. Looking this way and that, seeing no one, Moses, killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses sees this man being beaten by an Egyptian, and Moses makes a decision. He is going to defend his countrymen, his fellow Israelite, he is not going to remain faithful with the Egyptians. So this moment, Moses makes a choice. He is choosing the Israelites and not his adopted family, the Egyptians. And so he kills this Egyptian, and he hides the body. He thinks he's okay. So the next day, this is what happens. The next day, he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." So we learn a couple of important things from this little section. First, we actually see some foreshadowing. If you've read books, you know that sometimes authors foreshadow later events. If you've seen movies, sometimes they'll foreshadow what's happening later. The really good TV shows will give you an idea of what's happening at the end of the episode in a way that you don't really know what it's about, but then you'll learn throughout the episode what that ending is being teased. So in this case, we're seeing that Moses already has a proclivity to want to lead his people. He has some sort of desire to lead them and to guide them. And we also see from the beginning, and if you've read the story, you know that the Israelites. So we have Israel being foreshadowing is always rejecting Moses. If you read not just Exodus, but Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, and I feel like I'm missing anyone in there. Numbers. Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Those 4 books that come after those. So Exodus is the second book. So I'm messing myself all up. So the books that are after this, between Exodus and Deuteronomy, they're all about Moses and the Israelites trying to get to the promised land. And during that time, Moses is rejected time and time again by the Israelites as their leader. So we see this foreshadowed right here. Moses wants to step in and lead. They don't want to listen to him. So that's the sort of interesting little hint the author gives. But more on top of that, we learned for this specific story that Moses could be in trouble. His murder is no longer a secret. Somebody knows, and if somebody knows, odds are eventually Pharaoh will find out, and he's going to be in trouble. And so this is what happens in verse 15. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. All right, so Moses' past finally catches up with him. He has made a decision to remain faithful to his fellow Israelites. It's not clear why Pharaoh's after Moses. That has to be one of the reasons. Pharaoh must know about who Moses is too. And Moses' decision to save the Israelites or to intervene is a decision to choose his original family and not his adopted family. And so for Pharaoh, that's a problem, and he goes after Moses. But Moses runs, and he ends up at a well. If you've ever noticed, lots of interesting things happen at wells in the Bible. A well is a centerpiece of God's work in his people. Well, in this case, he goes to a well, and we're not going to read this part. I'm going to just tell you what happens in a couple of sentences. This is one of those sections where you can read about it, but I'm just going to tell you. So he goes to this well, and there's these daughters of a Midian priest there, and he helps them water their animals. And it makes it sound as if he sort of keeps people away from them so they can actually do the work. Since it's a bunch of daughters, they might have people just trying to take advantage and get in front. And then their father's like, "Well, why are you back so quick?" And they're like, "Well, this guy Moses, this Egyptian, helped us." And he says, "Well, why didn't you invite him home?" Because this Midian priest, he wants to thank this man for helping his daughters. So Moses ends up staying with his family. He ends up marrying one of those daughters. And now he has a new family. He is living with this Midian priest in Midian. Now Midian is this sort of unclear region, the group of people that kind of moved around outside of Egypt. And so they were just this group of people, and Moses lives with them. So at this point in the story, we see Moses' past has caught up with him. The secrets he was hoping would never be exposed has been exposed. Now, Moses' example is extreme, but still, we can understand and have that fear like Moses, that maybe our secrets will be exposed. Maybe it's nothing like a bad secret. Maybe it's just people realize we're really not the person they think we are. Maybe they'll find out that we've failed. Maybe they'll realize that we're a fake. Are we like Moses? That's where Moses is at. So he's out of Egypt. So what about the Egyptians? The Egyptians, the Israelites in Egypt. What's going on with them now that Moses is gone? The one who maybe could help them. This is what happens in verse 23. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. So that long period just refers to the period where Moses was in Midian. So during that time, the Pharaoh, after Moses died, and it seems to imply this is the same Pharaoh that enslaved them. So the Pharaoh who started everything is gone. Maybe that means things will get better for the Israelites. Certainly, hopefully that's good for Moses. It means that he could go back to Egypt and he would no longer be a fugitive. I mean, that's maybe not the case, but it's not like how we have here where like you have a warrant out for your arrest and it's just there in the system. I mean, Pharaoh was the system. And if the next Pharaoh doesn't care about Moses or know anything about him, Moses is okay. So let's see if we learn anything about the Israelites. Here's what we're told. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help became, because of their slavery, went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So we learn that things still aren't good, but we also learn that God has noticed. And specifically, he hasn't forgotten his covenant. Now, covenant just means promise. God made a promise to Abraham and his descendants. He said, I will bless you. I will make you into a great nation. And I will bless the nations through you. And then he said, you will have this land. And so God hasn't forgotten that promise. So he hasn't forgotten the Israelites. So is he going to save them? That's the question. Now we return to Moses. So Moses' story then picks up in chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So this is the famous burning bush story. Moses is tending his father-in-law's sheep. They're out walking, looking for a place for them to pasture. And he sees this bush that's on fire but not burning, as in there's clearly like flames around it, but it doesn't look like it's actually burning like you'd see a fire burn up a bush. And so he's curious. He goes over there, and in this bush is the angel of the Lord. God has sent his angel, his specific angel, the one we read about a couple weeks ago, the angel that came to Hagar. And actually, when we looked at that story, we looked at this one a little bit. God comes with this angel to meet with Moses. And he says to Moses, I am the God of your father Abraham and God of Isaac and Jacob. And so Moses realizes he's having this encounter with God. And so he covers his face. Now, why did he cover his face? This is one of those things in the Bible, whenever people encounter God, they tend to be scared. They tend to hide. They tend to feel as if they're unworthy. Now, this is not this is the posture, this is the polite way to be in God's presence. It's not like that. I think it's if any of us were in this story, we would be so terrified inside that this is the only way you respond. Because for whatever reason, whenever humans come close to God in his glory, specifically in the Old Testament, this is what happens. And so Moses encounters God, and he covers his face. And then this is what God says, verse 7. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. And so we learn at this point that God has seen his people, and he is going to save them. He's going to deliver them and give them their own land of freedom, a land that is full of both it's bountiful in agricultural opportunity and also natural resources, milk and honey. It's a land where they will be blessed. So God is going to rescue them. Now the question is, how is he going to do that? And this is what he says then to Moses, verse 10. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And so now Moses, the guy with a checkered past, is sent to rescue his people. Now Moses hasn't been there for a long time. The traditional sort of way it's said is that Moses was from 40 to 80 was gone. Now, those are just nice round numbers. But it could have been a number of years. Moses hasn't been back to Egypt. He's not the man he was when he left. He's now a shepherd for a Midian priest. He's not a prince. He's nobody. And don't forget, back in Egypt, he's actually a murderer. And he could be wanted for murder. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know where Pharaoh is at, if Pharaoh is going to receive him or arrest him. He knows none of that. He's this guy who lives in the middle of nowhere. And that's why Moses says this, verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He has that same thing that we have in our heads. I don't have what it takes. You don't know what I've really done, who I really am. I'm not worthy to do this work. Who am I that you ask me? And then he says this in 4:10. Now we're jumping way far down. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. So Moses says, look, who am I? I don't have the qualifications to do what you ask. I am not an eloquent speaker. I am not an impressive leader. I am not the person you want. Moses doesn't think he's worthy to do God's work. Just like all of us, those voices in his head about how he's less than, about how he's a runaway murderer, how he isn't competent to speak on behalf of God. All of those things come into his head, and Moses says, I am not the guy you need. How easy is it for us to be like Moses? How easy is it for us to discredit ourselves, to doubt our ability to contribute to God's work? How often do we as humans think that we do not have what it takes to do what God has called us to do? That is not my work. That's for somebody else. I am not good enough. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the skills. I don't have the courage, whatever it is, to do God's work. That's what Moses thought too. But look what God says. 3:12. So now we're going back to that conversation. This is what God said right to Moses after Moses said in 11. He says, who am I? So then in 12, this is what God says back. And God said, I will be with you. And then later in 20, he says, after a little more conversation, he says, so I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. So look, he's saying, I am the one who's going to do these wonders that is going to tell them who I am. And then in 21, he says, and I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed toward this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. And now down to 4:12, then God says, now go, and I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. And then in verse 15, I will help both of you, that's him and his brother Aaron, speak, and will teach you what to do. So Moses wants to say, I'm not able, I don't have the abilities. And all God says is, you won't do it alone. I will teach you. I will speak for you. I will work through you miraculous signs with this staff that you carry. And it will show the people of Egypt, and it will show Pharaoh that I am the God I claim to be. And the people will listen. I will turn the tables on Pharaoh and bring you favor amongst his people. And when you leave Egypt, they will literally give you their gold as you plunder them for the payment and the defeat of their gods as you leave. Because I will bring victory. I will do it, Moses, not you. I will work through you. This is what we often forget about doing God's work. We don't do it alone. We do it with God. He is the one who works through us. So even though we might say, I can't do that on my own, he's never asked you to do that. He's asked you to be his partner. So even though we might feel like Moses, unworthy, unable, unqualified, none of that matters to God. Because God can use anyone to do his work. And that's what we see throughout the book of Exodus. God can use anyone to do his work. And in a way, God uses both Moses and Pharaoh to do his work. Because Moses keeps showing up and Pharaoh keeps resisting. And the two of them working together, one asking, one resisting, refusing, is what does the work to set the Israelites free. Because God can use anyone to do his work. And this is what we see throughout the Bible. Time after time, humans that are unworthy and unable to do what they're called to do, or they don't feel like they're worthy and able. Who am I, God, that you would ask me to do this? That's how the story usually goes. But God can use anyone to do his work. So after this second section of Exodus, we see from the beginning that God will do anything to save his people, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to deliver them from Egypt, and he's going to show that he is the most powerful God. He is the God of gods. He is the creator of the world. But he uses people to do his work, and he can use anyone. And so he calls Moses. In spite of Moses' lack of ability, in spite of his lack of competence, God says, I will use you, Moses, to save my people, because God can use anyone to do his work. So next week we see Moses as he returns to Egypt. And as he meets with Pharaoh, the next Pharaoh, to say, I want you to let my people go, to worship God in the wilderness. We're going to see that God can use anyone to do his work. And what this means for us today is that God can use you, he can use me, he can use anyone, old, young, specialized, not specialized. God can use anyone to do his work. So here's my question for you today. How is God looking to use you for his work? He's not going to ask you to do what Moses did. And if we're honest, Moses was very qualified for what he was asked to do. He was a prince who was raised in the household of Pharaoh. He would have been able to speak the language that was needed to meet with Pharaoh. He would have known what to expect. He would have had an idea of what it meant to walk into the court of Pharaoh and to have a conversation. He would have probably still known people there who could give him access. Pharaoh wouldn't have met with anyone. But Moses had what it took to be there. God knew that Moses was the right man for the job. But it didn't mean that Moses thought that. And maybe that's what we need to understand. When God asks us to do something, it might be the smallest little thing. We can. Because we don't do it alone. Remember, he works through us. It might be something as simple as him saying, hey, I know this situation is really hard for you, and you want to do this, but I'm asking you instead to do that. I know it's going to be really hard, but I can do it with you because I do it with you. And when you do that small thing, you're actually doing my work. And God can use anyone to do his work. So regardless of who you are, regardless of what you've done, what you think you've done, regardless of that feeling of thinking you're fake or you're phony, that people, if they only knew who you really were, they would realize that you're not worth being with and working with. All of that goes out the window because God can use anyone to do his work, and he does.